Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So, it's hot takes, let's get into it. The Tyus Poole Coos Wizards are going to have a Utah Jazz-esque hot start to the season and will have a better record than the Warriors through the first 20 games. I don't know why you're singling out the Warriors specifically. I guess maybe because of the Jordan Poole thing. I could see a world where the Wizards are probably a little bit more competitive than some people would give them credit for. They do at the very least have a roster of a handful of pretty good NBA players. It's more a matter of the fit and more a matter of organizationally, are the Wizards really going to try to be winning games? Obviously, like, the coach and the players are going to try, but the organization itself is going to make sure to put a damper on their actual record, as the Utah Jazz front office made sure to do as the year went along. So that said, I do feel as though the Wizards might surprise people a little bit, but they're going to end up at the bottom of the conference one way or the other. Paul George is more skilled than Kevin Durant. More skilled does not equal better, by the way. Well, you know, if we're talking about versatility, that is just objectively the case. Paul George is one of the best perimeter defenders the game has ever seen. He was third in Defensive Player of Year voting at one point, and it was entirely valid. Paul George as a wing defensively is just excellent year after year. And Kevin Durant has had years, specifically with Golden State, where he was a positive defender and even bordering on all NBA caliber defender. Not quite there, but close to it. But overall, not a strong defender, but especially by contrast to Paul George. I feel like they're fairly equal rebounders. You know, who really gives a damn about that? And as a playmaker, feels like both of these guys are secondary playmakers, but when the role is called upon, you know, and one of them are called upon to actually be more of a distributor, I feel like Paul George is a little bit better at it than Kevin Durant is, but that feels arbitrary as well. So then if we're just getting simply to offensive bag, I think Kevin Durant's quote-unquote bag is actually kind of overrated, just in terms of like people discussing all the different moves that he can pull off. Technically, Kevin Durant can pull off basically every move offensively. I will give you that, and do it at a elite level and probably hit the shots at an elite level. For the most part with Kevin Durant, like half of his offense is a hesitation dribble into a pull-up mid-range shot that no one has any hope of contesting. He is a fairly repetitive player. He pretty much does the same thing all the damn time. Now, that same thing is super effective, so he has no reason to do anything different. But I do feel like people act as though Kevin Durant is just scoring in 15 different ways every game, and that's just not true. That said, Paul George doesn't necessarily display some kind of major versatility in terms of how he scores, and you know, I don't know that he necessarily has a post game that would be in the same tier as Kevin Durant. He is a better three-point shooter by a noteworthy margin. He has been better percentage-wise and higher volume pretty much every year since he broke out onto the scene. So he wins the three-point shooting contest. He obviously loses the mid-range shooting disparity. Even though Paul George is a fine mid-range shooter, Kevin Durant is a top 3 mid-range shooter of all time. I could see the argument for more versatility just simply based on the virtue of defense alone, but it's close, and Kevin Durant is overall the better player. The Pelicans are a directionless team hoping that injury-plagued players will not get injured. They have a weird cast of vets and young players that provide no traditional playmaking and no traditional rim protection. I don't really give a fuck about traditional playmaking. Let me just put that out there from the very onset. I don't even believe in the concept really of a lead playmaker. I understand that teams take that approach, and I literally just talked about Paul George and Kevin Durant being a secondary playmaker. But in truth, I believe the best way your offense can be ran is by just having a lot of guys who are capable of making plays, a handful of options. And I think a fully healthy Pelicans team, Zion is a really excellent passer. Brandon Ingram is a pretty damn good passer. CJ McCollum is a pretty damn good passer. And you take those three, have them lead your offense, and all three are capable of making the right play and creating shots for their teammates that are pretty good. good. You know, I don't know if any of them individually are quite elite playmakers, but 3 pretty damn good ones who also possess excellent scoring gravity. That's enough playmaking as far as I'm concerned. Now, as for rim protection, I've always felt as though the Jonas Valanciunas thing is kind of weird for the Pelicans. You kind of hoped that Zion would be more of like a weak side shot blocking, free roaming type of defender, but really he's just not a very impactful defender, period. But, you know, you have Herb Jones out there who blocks shots really well. You have big wings. I think you can get away without that much rim protection just simply by virtue of having a lot of good defensive versatility on the wing. And Valanciunas, while not necessarily sending a bunch of shots to the third row, is a really big body that knows how to position himself to get in the way. So that said, I actually really like how the Pelicans are constructed. The only real criticism they can get is that they're banking on injury-prone players. I agree with that notion, to save them. The thing is, though, the potential of that team as they exist right now is just too high to just throw that away. Like, I understand 2-3 years from now, if we're still talking about if Zion gets healthy, then all right, pull the fucking plug, man. Let's be honest here. But right now, there is still more than enough reason to hold out hope and try to make this core work. And I think, you know, they've proven when everybody's healthy, they are a dominant team. They were the first seed in the Western Conference for a big stretch of last season until, guess what? Zion Williamson got hurt. So it sucks. Injuries suck. But sometimes when you have a talent and the potential of that talent is as significant as it is, you kind of just have to hold out hope. And for the Pelicans, I really can't be critical of them for doing exactly that. Jason Tatum never has been and probably never will be as good as Pacers/Thunder Paul George. I think they're actually pretty damn close. I don't think there's really that big of a difference. If you actually take a look at all of their abilities individually, I think Jason Tatum is called upon to be a lead ball handler and playmaker too much, but that's just a matter of his circumstances. Really, I think he's built to be a far more off-ball player, as Paul George was in both of those instances in Indiana and OKC. And I think, you know, both excellent defenders, both really good shot creators. Paul George is a better three-point shooter for sure. Jason Tatum probably a little better in the mid-range, although the numbers might not actually be that different. Both pretty good slashers, both super athletic, both really tall, long wings. I think they're pretty comparable. And if you want to talk about like inconsistency or like not showing up in crunch time, that's things that Paul George was plagued with and still is throughout his entire career. So I think every strength that Paul George has is a strength of Jason Tatum's, and every weakness that Paul George has is a weakness of Jason Tatum's, and vice versa. I think they're pretty comparable. I wouldn't really say there's a strong distinction between either. Trae Young is on the same tier as Luka. I decided to include this take specifically because I have heard something along the lines of this take a couple of times this offseason, because of course there's nothing fucking going on, so people get bored and they start throwing shit at the wall. And yeah, this one's desperate to me. Trae Young is not on the same level as Luka Doncic. He just fucking isn't. Honestly, maybe the only reason for that is that Luka is 6'8", 6'9", or whatever, and Trae Young is not, but that makes a big fucking difference. Like, if you want to sit there and dissect each of their individual abilities, sure, comparable for sure. Both excellent playmakers, both excellent slashers, both excellent at getting to the free throw line, and both of them take a lot of jump shots that sometimes you're like, you maybe shouldn't have taken that. But overall, their efficiency proves excellent, and overall, their playmaking proves excellent. And defensively speaking, that's where there really is a big disparity, because Trae Young is a big problem defensively, and Luka has been a problem in the past defensively, but generally is okay. So that alone, height difference, makes a huge difference there. Rebounding is obviously a factor in that. Overall, just scheme defensively is a huge factor in that. I just trust a player who's 6'8" and can do what Luka can do more than a player who is 6'2" and can do what Trae can do. If you made Trae Young magically 6'8", maybe he's on the same tier as Luka Doncic, but that's it, and he's not. So unless you figured out how to make Trae Young taller, this is a dumb conversation. SGA is a top 5 player if he is in a bigger market than OKC. I hate the framing of this take because I just disagree with how people talk about this. If you want to maybe say more people would consider SGA top 5 if he played for a more popular franchise, you can go with that take. But I've seen people say things like this in this verbiage, suggesting that being a top player is inherently and strictly in many ways about being popular or being among one of the biggest franchises in the sport. And it's like, if SGA is top 5, which I don't think he is, but if he is, he could be top 5 in Charlotte. It doesn't fucking matter where you play. If you're a top 5 basketball player, you're a top 5 basketball player. Leave it at that. And I don't know if that's necessarily what Drink the Pepper here was trying to say. I will not drink the pepper, by the way. I'm not a fan personally. Hopefully don't get flaming pitchforks thrown at me for that. But in general, you're as good as you are. I don't care where you're playing. You're as good as you are. Anthony Davis was a top 5 player as a Pelican. As a Pelican! I just described this man as a Pelican, and he was still a top 5 player because he just fucking was. Where you rank is about how good you are at basketball. I don't give a fuck about what team you are playing for. Jaylen Brown would be worse statistically as a number 1 option on his own team. He's already 4th in the league in shot attempts, but gets second option attention from defenses because Tatum is there. As a number 1, he would get exposed. I pretty much agree. My biggest gripe with Jaylen Brown over the years was that people would consistently suggest that he was better than Tatum while not holding him to nearly the standards that Tatum would be held to. And things like defenses just obviously respecting and caring about Tatum more than Jaylen Brown doesn't seem to get factored into that. The amount of one-on-one matchups that Jaylen Brown would see himself with, whereas anytime Jason Tatum would touch the ball, he would get a double team, especially in a playoff setting, man, there is a clear difference. And I think Jaylen Brown is an excellent second option. But I've seen people suggest he can go further than that, and I just straight up disagree. Once you're leaning towards being a first option, you just simply have to be a better playmaker for yourself and your teammates. You have to be a better ball handler. I know that's a thing people harp on and like meme on, but it's genuinely a problem. All that stuff. It's something that has to be taken into consideration, and I just feel like it often is not with him. So yeah, I agree. But that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.